Well, the internet loves a punching bag, and it seems this week it's been Hellblade 2 Senua's Saga, which is bizarre, because if you go on Steam, it's got 2,600 reviews. It's got 88% positive ratings, right? But why, in social media and in even some headlines, is it getting quite a lot of flack? If I was to put the answer short, I'd say context. I mean, this is the first major Xbox release in months. It's one that's kind of going to start a chain of quarterly first-party titles, and if you're to look at gaming communities, the reactions are ranging from apathy to outright mockery, because the prevailing wind here is that Hellblade 2 has failed. That Ninja Theory is about to be closed. I mean, how could it not be? Just take a look at the headlines. Look at the discourse. It's only the 23rd most played game in Xbox on its launch, an Xbox first-party title. It didn't beat its predecessor in terms of Steam player numbers, and reviews are frequently saying it's kinda shallow, little bit middling, and it's barely a game. Yet 88% of people who have actually left a Steam review liked it. So today, my mission is to work out what the hell is going on, and really to understand how the headlines don't say everything and how the real problem for Ninja Theory is less that they've changed, and it's far more that everything around them has. But what hasn't is that I have got a sponsor segue for you. Brilliant.org/Bellular News. They've just relaunched some of their content. It's a great time to hop in, and what they're all about is helping you learn through thousands of interactive lessons across maths, data science, programming, essentially STEM topics, and you can get 20% off an annual plan and a 30-day free trial by clicking my link. So you can just go and play around and check it out. What Brilliant will do is it will hone your problem-solving skills, and it will get you to enjoy learning again. And what's key in my head is it does that in a time-efficient way. Active learning is proven to be 6 times more effective than lecture videos, that sort of passive learning, which is what I did in university, stuck in a lecture hall with 200 other people, bored out of my mind. Brilliant is the complete opposite for me, because it is more like a game, because it's interactive. And for just a teaser, here's a look at their programming learning path. This will get you using Python with their built-in editor. It'll teach you those core concepts and just how to actually think like a programmer. I think it is an absolutely fantastic starting point, and I say that, of course, as somebody who, is a CS grad. Personally, as an example, I've never really scratched my physics itch beyond high school, and I sit there watching all these physics videos on YouTube as I procrastinate. What I've recently been doing is just actually learning some of that physics on Brilliant, and it's been really enjoyable. So rather than doom scrolling, you can just hit the Brilliant app in your phone and start enjoying it there. Now, you, of course, can try everything that Brilliant has got to offer for free today by going to brilliant.org/Bellular News for that 30-day trial, or you can click the link down in the description, and you'll also there get 20% off an annual premium subscription, which is an insane value, because I really do think they're on a fantastic mission, and it's just a brilliant service. So, thanks to them for sponsoring, and let's go. Let's try to start with some hard evidence here. So, number one, context is everything, and it's so different here. Hellblade originally was a scrappy kind of indie team being funded to produce a high-fidelity narrative game that punched well above its weight. At the time that Hellblade came out, everyone was talking about the AA future, the idea that we do not need, say, a massive Ubisoft open-world game, or maybe a game like, say, The Last of Us Part 2. Super high fidelity and all of that, but I think for a lot of people, it was very, very, very long. So for so many, Hellblade was like a shorter, more focused experience, and they really loved it. Plus, it was a AA success story, the kind of thing we all wanted to see. So that's what Hellblade 1 was. Hellblade 2, though? Well, it's the vanguard of the Xbox revival. It is there to get you on Game Pass. And yeah, the tone around Microsoft is absolutely awful. Of course, whenever Hellblade 1 was a thing, guess what? This was an independent company. It wasn't owned by Microsoft. So, big picture here, the expectations are different. Most importantly, Microsoft just went and killed 2 entire studios, right? 2 studios that made games that objectively had better launch numbers. And I know that's kind of a crazy thing to say, but yeah, you compare Hi-Fi Rush to Hellblade 2, and Hi-Fi Rush absolutely does look stronger. So how then can Hellblade 2 be considered a success when it has not surpassed the game that came before it, or the 2 games that came out from studios that Xbox themselves just closed? Again, to take a look at the peak player counts, Hellblade 2, 3,982 players. Redfall? 6,124, and I think we all know that Redfall was not particularly successful. So, this feels bad. It looks bad. We're getting tweets like these. I find it unbelievable that Hi-Fi Rush has a better all-time player count than even Hellblade 2 and better overall reviews, and yet Tango gets the axe while Ninja Theory gets greenlit for another project. This is absolute insanity, IMO. And you can obviously see why that spread. It does seem like absolute insanity. But again, that's just PC. This is an Xbox game for Xbox, so surely it did great in consoles. If you're following the headlines, you'd think it did awfully in consoles, because it did not even manage to crack the top 10 played games on Xbox consoles on its own launch weekend. It was in fact the 16th most played game in the UK and Xbox, and the 23rd most played game on US Xbox. I mean, you see that and immediately think, holy crap, this game launched into a black hole. Just that, from those headlines, you may not pick up on a few interesting things. As an example, right? The reason why those numbers are so particularly bad looking is because this entire chart is based on the number of hours that players play. Hellblade 2 has got a 5-hour runtime, okay? So even if you were to play Hellblade 2 multiple times, somebody just playing Fortnite in their normal gameplay behavior, they will completely outpace Hellblade 2. And that really sums up the whole situation here, because Hellblade 1 launched in 2017. Funny enough, and this is not a serious point in the video, but it is just funny that it's the same time that Fortnite Battle Royale came out and kind of, well, you know, live surface acceleration goes vroom. And that's also the year that the Xbox One X launched, right? That kind of cemented Microsoft's big doomed console plan. Of course, this was all before they had acquired Ninja Theory. It was a different time, and since the launch of Hellblade 1, the entire industry, the whole publishing model, and audience expectations have just totally changed. So the truth here is not that Ninja Theory has changed massively. I mean, we can see that when we basically look at Hellblade 2 and find that they functionally made the same game twice and they're getting a fairly similar response. Now, I know that's being reductive. Hellblade 2 is different in some ways than Hellblade 1. I think a lot of common player perceptions right now are that they were very much indexing on the visual fidelity, which, I mean, I totally get they are using as a storytelling tool. There are some marvelous performances, absolutely industry-leading sound design and that kind of thing. But Hellblade 2 doesn't get to be Hellblade 2 when it comes out in this context, and when ultimately it is serving the plan of an extremely embattled company that is getting nothing but negative headlines. Let's go to the direct comparison then. So, Hellblade 1 launched on PS4 and PC in April 2017, right? When you take a look at Metacritic, you see a score of 81, and basically the reviews are saying that this is really impressive in terms of graphical fidelity, especially for a team of its size. They say that it's an emotionally resonant story, but the game is criticized for simplistic gameplay and overall being pretty short runtime. I mean, the gameplay, simple. I think a lot of people would say uninspired. When you take a look at Hellblade 2, you can see it is continuing to be simple. Lots of detailed animations, but very simple. Now, at launch, the Steam numbers peaked at 5.6K. And this came to Xbox One April 18th, and in June, Ninja Theory reported 1 million sales from the game, despite it only being a digital release at the start. So I think that's a fairly major thing, right? It comes out in April 2017, hits a new platform 2018, and then in June, so I guess what, like a year and 2 months, they say they've managed to hit 1 million sales for the game. Overall then, a pretty nice story. So Hellblade 2 came out, Xbox, Series consoles, and PC. Funny enough, it got a Metacritic score of around 81, and again, it's not that I'm using Metacritic like it's some sort of amazing site. It's just that Metacritic and OpenCritic can be kind of useful for the overall average kind of water temperature sort of thing for a game. But again, when we dive into the details here, the impressiveness, graphical fidelity is insane, right? Sound design, insane. But once again, it is criticized for a short runtime and very, very uninspired gameplay. To some people, Hellblade 2 even ends up being a little bit of a backslide in some regards as compared to the first one. But again, I think that you're always going to have that thing. If you're doing a sequel that is kind of more, but isn't really changing things, isn't really spicing up the formula, you really struggle. And in fairness, this is something that so many games struggle from. I mean, hell, if you were to take a game like this with its graphical fidelity and all of that, and you were to look at the other console company, you would probably think like their big main competitor. I mean, again, these are not games that are competing, but you could certainly think of Naughty Dog, and given the very high fidelity graphics a lot of people have thought of Naughty Dog, even The Last of Us Part 2 in some ways, right, struggled under its weight, because Part 2 has got to be a sequel. It ends up being a way bigger game, and for some people, that maybe messes up the pace a little bit. So things like this are always a fairly tough act to follow. Even with Naughty Dog, they were trying to work out how do we still keep our game to play like Last of Us, but, you know, actually move forward and advance as a game. Back to Hellblade though, we have Steam numbers of in and around 4K, but of course we cannot see Game Pass on PC, and this is a game that was only released digitally. So as much as these are not humongous live service game numbers, what it does show, right, is that Ninja Theory have accomplished quite the feat. They have made a sequel that has got almost exact replicated critiques and I suppose successes of the predecessor. In some ways, that's fairly impressive, again, for people who maybe wanted more of an Aliens to its Alien, or who maybe wanted like a bigger game experience, who maybe wanted the budget that would perhaps come with being owned by Microsoft to go into more than just graphical fidelity. Well, those people are not really going to be as happy. But when we look at the development timeline, things actually continue to get interesting. So Hellblade was announced in 2014 with a trailer, and it came out in 2017. You could presume maybe at least a year of development beforehand to reach the state of the trailer. I mean, again, it's hard, like, how do you count these things? Because in terms of the amount of, like, money you're spending, that goes up massively with production. But maybe you've got, like, half a year of pre-production beforehand. It's kind of hard to say. Now, Hellblade 2 is weird. Ninja Theory have said that they did not spend 7 years building Hellblade 2. Per Ninja Theory's lead, Dom Matthews, in an interview that he did with Kinda Funny, they actually started development of this game in 2020, and this is after they ended support for Bleeding Edge. I have a question, dear viewer. Do you remember Bleeding Edge? I don't think anyone remembers Bleeding Edge. I mean, Bleeding Edge was like, it was peak of you know that era when everyone was doing some sort of like, hey, we're going to be inspired by Overwatch, we're going to throw in a bit of Borderlands, we're going to go all punky and edgy, but not actually edgy, you know, sort of safe punk. Is that what we could maybe call it? Safe punk? I don't know, but that was kind of what Bleeding Edge was. It was... I mean, when we all saw it revealed, it did look like just about the most doomed game in existence. A little bit of a Battleborn situation. And obviously that is a game that absolutely, unfortunately it did just flop. Now, this does mean that if Xbox were pitched a sequel to Hellblade that would at least match the sorts of numbers that Hellblade got, then I suppose Microsoft got what they wanted. Because when you look at Ninja Theory's previous outputs, it's really not like Xbox was clamoring for more Bleeding Edge or more DMC, Devil May Cry. Like, Hellblade ended up being the thing their studio was known for, was kind of loved for, so they went and made another Hellblade. But that's really that, and unfortunately, since Hellblade 1, the world has kept on spinning. So, time flows. Let's talk about the context of this launch. So, as an example, one thing that I've seen loads of people say, like in our comment sections, me just watching other videos, is that there was no marketing for Hellblade 2. Well, did the game get marketed? I mean, objectively, yes. Like, there has been an advertising campaign. This stuff has been going on for months. They've been doing, you know, previews with IGN, all of that stuff. However, you may not have seen it. And that's because one thing that I think has become apparent in recent times is that audiences in gaming are becoming way more siloed in how they are presented information. I mean, audiences didn't know about Palworld, even though it was at every Jeff Keighley showcase for a year. Take Helldivers 2. For a lot of people, that just appeared out of nowhere. But no, Helldivers was being shown off by PlayStation from spring of 2023. I think the pretty damn rough fact here is that audiences actually don't know a lot about loads of games because the stuff that they see on YouTube or anything like that, it's algorithmically surfaced, right? And there is a bit of a fact limit for all of us. We can only take in so much. This is, of course, the same internet that is currently gutting sites and content providers, of course, scraping it all with AI, leading, obviously, to Google making massive tits out of themselves. Haven't got to talk about that in the channel yet, but yeah. Google Gemini has some interesting solutions to a mental health crisis. Anyway, back to Microsoft, back to Hellblade. we all maybe think that the game had no advertising or anything like that. Well, here's a great example of Microsoft taking no chances. They added an advertisement to try the game on boot so that they could speak to monogamers. And whenever I say monogamer, all that I really mean there is the sort of person, maybe they buy FIFA, they buy COD, maybe they buy Assassin's Creed, and that's really all that they do. Like, that is how they interface with gaming. Maybe instead of watching a channel like us, they're maybe watching, like, you know, football channel, general entertainment channel, Sideman, that kind of thing. So here we see Tom Warren reporting something that I didn't see in my own Xbox, thankfully, because I don't like full screen pop-up ads. But yeah, there you go, a one-time pop-up notification. And even if you have played Hellblade 2, this notification pops up. Of course, Microsoft using pieces of UI to be advertisements. That's actually happened, I believe, since, it's either Windows 95 or Windows 99. Where they had a whole bunch of like sponsored links for AOL in the start menu. You know, a lot more innocuous than the current sorts of telemetry that Microsoft are slurping up in all of us. Another side of this here is that this is Microsoft's big game. I mean, man, take a look at Microsoft's big games. You got Halo Infinite, you know, you got Forza with your cars and everything, but do they have anything that competes with the cinematic efforts of Sony? I mean, you have cinematic, but also big video game like Spider-Man. You've got, of course, the God of War games. You've got The Last of Us. Compare them. This is 5 hours of middling gameplay. And honestly, look, I don't like saying it because I respect what this team set out to make. Gameplay for them is not a humongously important part of the experience. I think the idea is, hey, do you love movies like, say, The Northman? Do you want... Oh, maybe Northman would suggest more combat. But anyway, do you just want peak vibes? Right? Like, I get it. That's what they were going to go and make. But as I said at the top of this video, it's not that they've changed, it's that everything around them has changed, including their ownership. Now, their 5 hours of gorgeous middling gameplay have got to fight against the Spider-Man or The Last of Us, right? That's hard. And yes, Hellblade 2 is cheaper, but it's a $20 price difference. A lot of people are going to say, all right, $50, 5 hours, $70, 20 plus hours. And I think we know, and again, I do not like the idea of just reducing things to dollars per hour a video game, but I think there does come a point whenever pricing is premium that a lot of people do actually have to worry about value because there's only so much disposable income. If gaming is your hobby, then you probably want to wait on something like a Hellblade 2 and just play it in Game Pass or pick it up in a sale. So this really is less a big Sony first party, and you know what it's far more like? You've forgotten about this game, The Order 1886, or maybe Rise Son of Rome. Both exclusive, short-length, fidelity-forward cinematic games that really, really did suffer for what they were. Now, I'd say that probably is a harsh comparison to Hellblade. It does seem that Hellblade is like better received overall, but still, times are weird, vibes are weird, and that's why even Ninja Theory went and put up a thank you post in, of course, the now ubiquitous, the famous, you know, here is a branded screenshot of text. So they posted this thank you thing, and to a lot of people that was kind of weird, because when you read it, it's just a genuine thank you, right? While it's not a massive franchise, the people who love it, and especially with a lot of the narrative, a lot of people deeply connected and deeply related. So this to me doesn't come off as some sort of weird attempt or anything like that. It does actually feel completely authentic. Like when you're doing a story that is diving so deep into mental health, you are going to form a really, really like a powerful and meaningful connection with some of your audience. So I think that reflects that more than anything else. And I think the idea that this isn't a spooky post is kind of confirmed by, as an example, Jez Corden's reporting. So Jez Corden wrote, however, we can confirm via our trusted sources that, in addition to Project Mara, Team Ninja's next game has already been greenlit. There are no plans whatsoever to close the studio anytime soon. Again, you know, no plans anytime soon. We can still be a little skeptical there. Xbox have shown that they can, change their minds and things, but it is a bit of a contrast to the situations with Tango Gameworks and Arcane Austin, because those were both studios in the middle of pitching projects, whereas here with this studio, they were not. They already had things worked out. So we got to end this on value, and that's really hard because value is entirely in your eyes. It is not in mine, it is in yours. So let's walk through this. Hellblade 1 cost $30. Hellblade 2, $50. So for a lot of people, they look at this and say, okay, it cost more, maybe it sold a bit less. But Hellblade 2 while it does cost $50, also comes with Game Pass as standard. And that does kind of change up the value proposition because you can play Hellblade 2 for $10.99. And at 5 hours, it really is $10.99 because I don't think you're going to take over a month to complete it in Game Pass. But of course, that's not really the point. Value is nigh on impossible to define. Here we are talking about video games and, buying a game, whereas of course you got the likes of the Diablo 4 $75 horse. Okay, technically it's $75 worth of currency that comes with a horse, but you get the point. And it gets messier when we compare it to other games. Compare it to Spider-Man as I did, but also compare $50 for 5 hours of Hellblade versus $70 for 35 plus hours of Stellar Blade. To some people, and again, I don't like looking at art in this way, but you can get the point. People have only got limited money. $10 an hour versus $2 an hour. But yet still, Hellblade 2 is twice as long as the now hit indie game Duck Detective: The Secret Salami. That only costs $9. So how does the maths work out? Because you could also think about a Netflix sub or a cinema ticket or an IMAX ticket if you really want your money to explode. Or of course a free-to-play live service game subsidized by whales. See, the problem here is all of these things are radically different experiences from each other, but here I am using the same language to try and compare them because it's really the only thing that we've got, right? So you kind of then have got to turn to everything else around the game to prove its value, in terms of like public perception. So that means instead of dollars, we're talking player numbers, we're talking review scores, Twitch views, YouTube videos, a lot of those factors. Why? Because now it's actually often less about the video game, and it's more about the sport of talking about the video game. I mean, as an example, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Take a look at that in Steam, and man, you're probably going to think it's awful. But you know what? For a lot of core COD fans, it's a big step up over Modern Warfare 2, and they really like it. How many big live service games are infinitely talked about and, have a trepidatious relationship with their audience? Like pretty much most of them. So in a way, this is a sign of a wider industry shift. Value is not something that is assigned to single-player linear titles by a wider audience. It is seemingly harder for those to penetrate in. Now, again, we always get extremely happy whenever a single-player game does well. Like say Jedi Fallen Order. Now to weave some data into this feeling, into this vibe, here's some stuff from Game Discover Co. This is data as of March of this year. And you can see that multiplayer titles and systemic titles are absolutely there, right? So your Helldivers, Enshrouded, Pal World, that kind of thing. Then you got some more niche mechanical interest, right? The likes of, say, Backpack Battles or Supermarket Simulator. But the closest thing that you have here to a sort of traditional single-player linear game is P3 Reload, which is a remake. And it's frustrating because a lot of people say that we almost want shorter, better constructed games that value our time, that are not padded out. But between the data in Steam and the way that Hellblade 2 hasn't really changed in player reception and critical reception since 2017, it does seem at the very least like it is still hard for a single-player game, as if a single-player game has got to make some sort of large cultural impact in order to actually do well. Now, obviously, that does not mean that single-player games won't succeed. Funnily enough, we're a studio that makes single-player narrative games, and that sort of is That's the point. Check out Bellular on Steam. Anyway, that's basically it. Hellblade 2 has absolutely not set the world on fire. It's likely doing similar to Hellblade 1. I mean, maybe it's doing way better in Game Pass. Obviously, the Game Pass install base is... I know it's not growing massively, but it's still like 33 million plus people. So there's probably a lot of people are going to play this game. Maybe even more than Hellblade 1. Of course, Hellblade 1 itself is also on Game Pass. And ultimately, if you've got Game Pass, you can go and just play both of these games. You don't have to worry about any of this value stuff. But again, I think the main lessons from today's video, the things that were kind of, as you and I, as industry onlookers, people who are interested in this, what we are seeing is, for some of these games, it's not that the games are changing or the studios are changing as much. It's more that the world around them is changing. And it's very, very hard to get noticed. It's hard to stand out. That's it for now. Go play some cool stuff in Steam. And I suppose until then, we can all go and grind out our live service titles until we ask Google Gemini how on earth we're going to cope and probably get a funny response. Have a great day. I'll see you next time.